In the long, cheerful parade of Disney characters who have spent a career tripping over rakes, falling off rooftops, and turning ordinary chores into slapstick symphonies, Goofy had always been a reliable uncle figure, the guy who shows up, breaks something expensive, laughs in his own unique, vowel-heavy dialect, and somehow leaves everyone in a better mood. For decades, he functioned like a warm gust of cartoon wind, blowing through a scene just long enough to scatter hats, uproot dignity, and remind everyone that life is funnier when it refuses to cooperate. He was the sort of character who could treat a handshake like a gymnastics routine and a simple trip to the hardware store like an expedition to the edge of civilization. Audiences knew what they were getting: elastic limbs, optimistic incompetence, and a heart so plainly visible it might as well have had its own credit in the opening titles. Goof Troop took that familiar chaos and performed a small but meaningful miracle with it. Rather than sending Goofy into another short subject where a canoe explodes, a camera bites him back, or a do-it-yourself project turns into an emergency call, the series settled him into a house, gave him a kid, and asked the most radical question an early 1990s Disney cartoon could ask without wearing a trench coat and quoting French philosophers. What if Goofy had to parent in real time? Not in a tidy, moral-of-the-week way that wraps itself up like a gift basket, but in the ongoing, day-to-day way where yesterday's mess leaves a faint stain and tomorrow's problem is already knocking at the door. Produced by Walt Disney Television Animation and created by Robert Taylor and Michael Peraza Jr., Goof Troop arrived during the era when the Disney afternoon turned weekday syndication into a kind of after-school town square. In many households, it became part of the daily rhythm. You know, the bright and bouncy show that waited on the other side of homework and snack time, as dependable as the clink of a spoon in a cereal bowl. It ran as a main syndicated series of 65 episodes from 1992 to 1993, with an additional 13 episodes airing on Saturday mornings on ABC, plus a Christmas special that popped up in late 1992 like a festive fruitcake. It was also, in a quiet way, a milestone. The first Disney television cartoon to lean fully into the situation comedy format rather than action-adventure. That shift mattered. A sitcom is a promise that the real battleground is social life, domestic life, the low-grade stress of neighbors, school, chores, and pride. It meant the big dramatic stakes weren't save the world, but survive the neighborhood, which is arguably harder and definitely more relatable. The show's background is inseparable from Disney's early 1990s confidence that cartoons could be both entertainment and ecosystem. This was an era when animated series were not merely programs. They were hubs in a larger wheel of consumer culture, merchandising, and brand identity. Goof Troop wasn't simply launched. It was rolled out like a new soft drink flavor with a marketing campaign that reportedly involved major partners and a Get Goofy push, valued at an eye-popping $100 million. The language of that campaign alone suggests a kind of corporate showmanship, as if getting goofy were a lifestyle choice that could be purchased in convenient sizes. Kellogg's cereals carried figurine giveaways in the summer of 1992, turning breakfast into a treasure hunt and transforming kitchen tables into tiny stages where characters could be lined up, traded, lost, rediscovered under couch cushions, and mythologized as rare by kids who had never seen a real supply chain. Burger King joined with Kids Club displays and premiums in the fall, meaning the show's faces greeted families under fluorescent lights while fries cooled and parents negotiated dessert with the seriousness of diplomats. Pacific Theaters offered collector cups because nothing says family bonding like hydrating from a plastic chalice, emblazoned with a smiling dog man. The kind of souvenir that would live in a cupboard for years and then reappear, scratched but proud, at a backyard barbecue. Pizza Hut followed in early 1993 with a kids' pizza pack that bundled wearable goofware with a kind of meal that made children feel simultaneously powerful and sticky. There's something almost poetic about that particular pairing. The show's world of playful mess arriving alongside a small personal pan pizza that could turn any child into a sauce-smeared monarch. Goof Troop plants its flag in Spoonerville, a hometown that feels like a bright, slightly exaggerated riff on West Coast suburbia. Sunny, roomy, obsessed with lawns and gadgets, and always one unplanned mishap away from needing an ice pack. Spoonerville is the kind of place where a driveway can double as a stage, where a fence is not just a fence, but a conversation line between neighbors, and where the distance between houses is close enough for trouble to spread, but far enough for everyone to pretend they have privacy. Goofy, a single father, moves there with his son, Max, and winds up living next door to his old high school friend Pete, a used car salesman and owner of Honest Pete's Used Cars. The word honest in that business name does the heavy lifting of a full confessional, the kind of self-aware branding that practically begs the audience to smirk. It also places Pete firmly within a particular suburban archetype, the guy who sells aspiration, who measures success in shine and horsepower, who wants the neighborhood to see him as a winner even if he has to shout over the evidence. Pete's household completes the suburban puzzle. Peg, a real estate agent with composure and a wry sense that she is the only adult in the room, and their two kids, PJ and Pistol. With those details, the show sketches an entire social map in a few strokes. Salesmanship next door, property values in the air, status anxiety simmering beneath barbecue smoke, and children growing up under the crossfire of adult quirks. Max and PJ become best friends almost instantly, as if friendship is simply a natural resource found in cul-de-sacs, sprouting between mailboxes and basketball hoops. Their bond makes Spoonerville feel lived in. It suggests a world where kids can roam from yard to yard, where a best friend is less a scheduled appointment and more a constant presence, like the neighbor's dog barking at nothing or the ice cream truck appearing at the precise moment homework is due. Their closeness also provides the show with a steady engine for stories. Two kids with enough imagination to create a problem and enough loyalty to face it together, even when the adults, especially the adults, make everything weirder. The premise is deceptively simple. One household runs on well-meaning chaos, the other runs on bluster, status anxiety, and the kind of control that comes from believing every problem can be solved by being louder than it. This contrast is the engine that powers nearly every episode, setting up a friendly but constant collision between two philosophies of living side by side. Goofy's home is ruled by accident and optimism, where intentions matter more than results and mistakes are treated as temporary weather patterns rather than permanent failures. Pete's household, by contrast, operates on volume, hierarchy, and appearances, with success measured in dominance and order rather than happiness. The comedy blooms in the space between those extremes, as each family inadvertently holds up a distorted mirror to the other, revealing both their strengths and their blind spots. Much of the humor springs from Max being, by cartoon standards, a remarkably normal kid. He wants to fit in at school. He wants his plans to work the way they look in his head. And he would really like his father to stop turning a simple hello into a pratfall that becomes local legend by lunch. Max's frustrations feel grounded and familiar, rooted in the universal childhood fear of standing out for the wrong reasons. He is not chasing grand power fantasies or epic destinies. He just wants a smooth day, a decent reputation, and perhaps a small victory he can call his own. That relatability makes him an unusually effective anchor for the show, because his reactions mirror the audience's own mixture of affection and exasperation toward Goofy's antics. Goofy, on the other hand, is pure kinetic optimism, the sort of parent who can transform pick-up groceries into unintentionally host a parade. He approaches every task with confidence, unburdened by foresight, trusting that enthusiasm will somehow substitute for planning. His failures are rarely malicious or lazy. They are the byproducts of trying too hard and believing too much. Where Max sees social peril, Goofy sees opportunity. Where Max hears laughter, Goofy hears applause. Their relationship gives the show its heart. Max is the straight man with a conscience and a social life, constantly attempting to steer events toward normalcy, while Goofy is a walking weather event who tries, fails, tries again, and somehow communicates love through persistence. The show's emotional core lies in the idea that love does not require competence to be sincere, and that embarrassment, while painful, is not fatal. The supporting cast turns Spoonerville into a full comic ecosystem rather than a simple backdrop. Pete is the show's closest thing to an antagonist, but crucially, he isn't the classic criminal bruiser of earlier Disney eras. This Pete is a family man, greedy and stingy, prideful about appearances, and frequently cruel in the casual sitcom way, more insult of the week than villain monologue. His antagonism is social rather than sinister. He wants to win conversations, dominate spaces, and be seen as superior, especially in comparison to Goofy, whose effortless likability seems to irritate him on a cellular level. Pete treats PJ like an employee he forgot to pay and treats Goofy like a friend he keeps around purely to feel superior, a dynamic that fuels much of the show's tension and humor. And yet, Goof Troop occasionally lets the mask slip. In moments of genuine danger or emotional stress, Pete's bluster collapses into panic, revealing a man who cares deeply but expresses that care poorly. There are flashes of regret, quick bursts of fear, and rare instances of self-awareness that suggest his bravado is less evil than insecurity. These moments don't absolve him, but they complicate him, allowing Pete to function as something more than a stock bully. Peg, meanwhile, often reads like the grown-up version of the audience. Amused, exasperated, and capable of slicing through nonsense with a look. She understands the absurdity of her surroundings and navigates it with a calm competence that contrasts sharply with her husband's volatility. PJ is the tender-hearted, eager-to-please kid who gets tugged between his dad's expectations and his own gentle nature, embodying the quiet sadness and resilience of a child who wants approval more than victory. Pistol, by contrast, is pure mischief with a smile, an embodiment of the chaos children can wield when adults underestimate how fast little legs can run and how sharp little minds can be. The voice cast helped sell this careful balancing act of warmth and frenzy, grounding the exaggerated animation in performances that felt emotionally sincere. Bill Farmer, who had become Goofy's official voice in 1987, made this his first major project centered on the character, and he plays Goofy like a brass instrument with a heart, capable of both booming comedy and soft, reassuring notes. Dana Hill voices Max with the exact blend of adolescent sincerity and please don't embarrass me panic the premise requires, capturing the emotional volatility of a kid who is old enough to care deeply about appearances, but young enough to still need his dad. Jim Cummings, in his first major turn as Pete for Disney, gives Pete a booming, gravelly authority that makes even his petty complaints sound like proclamations, lending the character an outsized presence that fills every room he enters. April Winchell's Peg provides crisp, grounded timing, often delivering her lines like well-placed pins popping inflated egos, while Rob Paulson's PJ radiates sweet-natured elasticity, an emotional rubber band stretched between friendship and family pressure. Nancy Cartwright's Pistol brings a familiar spark of impish confidence, injecting scenes with restless energy and fearless curiosity. Frank Welker's many roles add texture and comic variety to Spoonerville's rotating gallery of oddballs, ensuring the town feels populated by more than just its core families. Together, the cast transforms what could have been simple archetypes into characters with texture, rhythm, and surprising emotional range. Goof Troop's production and broadcast history also reads like a snapshot of early 1990s television economics, when success did not always guarantee longevity. The series was previewed on the Disney Channel and then rolled into syndication in September 1992 with a 2-hour special, before settling into regular episodes on the Disney afternoon starting September 7th. 5 days later, it debuted on ABC's Saturday morning lineup because the show was apparently determined to be everywhere children might exist, from weekday afternoons to weekend mornings. Ratings suggest it worked. It opened in syndication with a 3.9 Nielsen rating, then quickly found itself in the same conversation as Fox Kids' Batman, the animated series, even surpassing Batman in several markets during September 1992. By late October, it was topping the week among children aged 2 to 11 with a 6.6 rating, and by April 1993, it reportedly hit a 9.1 in that demographic, making it Disney's most popular show at the time and one of the most watched weekly children's series overall. Yet in February 1993, Disney announced it wouldn't renew the show for another season, citing the unglamorous realities of network license fees and rising production costs. It is one of television's enduring ironies that a show can be popular, talked about, and culturally resonant, and still lose to mass. The cancellation underscores how the business side of television can operate independently of audience affection, cutting short a series that had clearly found its rhythm and its viewers. Awards and nominations added a formal stamp to what kids already knew instinctively. These characters worked, and the people bringing them to life were doing something special. Jim Cummings won an Annie Award in 1993 for voice acting as Pete, recognition that highlighted how much personality and nuance he brought to a character who could easily have been one note. The Daytime Emmys recognized the show with nominations for writing, music direction, and composition for the Christmas special, and sound mixing, acknowledgments that Goof Troop was being taken seriously by an industry that often dismissed animated sitcoms as disposable. In an era when animation was still frequently treated as just for kids, in the most reductive sense, those nods mattered, affirming that craft, performance, and storytelling could coexist with slapstick and still be worthy of attention. Home media and later distribution helped turn that childhood familiarity into a multi-generational rediscovery, the kind of afterlife that family animation often dreams about. Disney released 3 VHS volumes in early 1993, which meant the show could be replayed, rewound, and used as babysitting wallpaper on rainy days. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes because the tape was already in the VCR and nobody wanted to get up. Those VHS releases also encouraged a particular kind of repeat viewing that shaped nostalgia in the era. Children didn't necessarily rewatch a season, they rewatched whatever episodes they happened to own until those specific stories became comfort food. A handful of episodes could turn to personal canon simply through repetition, worn into memory by the soft hiss of tape, and the occasional tracking issue that made everyone's outlines wobble for a moment like they were underwater. Years later, the series' migration into remastered high definition for digital purchase gave it another form of durability, this time with cleaner lines, brighter colors, and the strange sensation of seeing an old favorite look more polished than it ever did on a childhood television. With one noted exception, Counterfeit Goof, most episodes became available in that upgraded form, letting viewers return with adult eyes to jokes they missed and emotional beats they didn't know they'd stored away. The series also found a long-term streaming home on Disney Plus from the service's launch in 2019, which shifted Goof Troop from something you had to chase through reruns into something you could summon on demand, like calling up an old friend who always answers. Reruns, meanwhile, cycled through Disney's cable ecosystem, the Disney Channel and Toon Disney, giving the show the kind of slow-burn longevity that often outlasts its original production footprint. The result is that Goof Troop never really vanished. It simply changed addresses, moving from syndication afternoons to cable rotations to streaming libraries, each era producing a new wave of viewers who met Spoonerville in a slightly different way. Then came the expansion into a broader franchise, which is often the moment a TV show stops being just a show and becomes a small universe. Walt Disney Pictures produced 2 standalone films spun out of the series. A Goofy movie, released theatrically on April 7, 1995, and an extremely goofy movie, released direct-to-video on February 29, 2000. The films widened Max's story, pushing him toward teenhood and beyond, and in doing so cemented the father-son dynamic as something more than a weekly gag engine. They treated that relationship as a central emotional engine, still comedic, still prone to spectacle, but capable of carrying bigger feelings and longer arcs. In a way, the films functioned like the next grade up in the life of the characters. The show is the neighborhood years. The movies are the adolescence and growing up years. And the connective tissue is always the same tender truth that Goofy's love is unstoppable, even when his execution is a mess. A Super Nintendo game arrived in 1993, too, because the early 1990s had a near mystical belief that anything enjoyable should also exist as a cartridge. It's hard to overstate how much that mattered to the era's sense of a property's presence. A game didn't just extend the brand. It let kids step into the world and do the running, jumping, and chaos themselves, turning the show Slapstick into a kind of interactive playdate. And like so many rentals of the time, it lived in the strange ecosystem of weekend ritual. Bring it home, play it intensely, argue over turns, or cooperate depending on the day, and then return it with a slightly battered box and the faint anxiety that someone else might have already claimed it next time. Legacy can be measured in many ways. Reruns, memes, revival cameos, and the quiet decision by later creators to treat Spoonerville as a real place that counts, not merely a bygone cartoon setting. Goof Troop's version of Goofy and Pete became a default template for their family lives in later appearances. throughout the 1990s and into the mid-2000s, which is a subtle kind of victory. It means the show didn't just borrow familiar characters, it contributed back to the larger Disney character library, reshaping how Goofy and Pete could be used. Later projects could treat Goofy as an earnest dad and Pete as the blustery neighbor with a family life, rather than reverting them to simpler, older archetypes. That's a form of cultural stickiness, a creative choice that becomes the obvious version of the characters for future storytellers. The DuckTales reboot later winked at Spoonerville by name, and even used Goofy in his Goof Troop design, with Max and PJ appearing as photos, an affectionate nod that says, without speeches or fanfare, "Yes, we remember your childhood too." Those kinds of cameos matter, because they function like small certificates of authenticity. They reassure longtime viewers that their memories weren't disposable, that the world they loved wasn't erased by newer productions, merely expanded around. Disneyland's Mickey's Toontown refurbishment in 2023 reportedly added photos inside Goofy's house featuring Goofy and Max, Pete's family, and the kids together, plus a height chart, which is a particularly sweet way of making fictional growth feel physical and real. A photograph on a wall is domestic evidence. A height chart is a record of time passing. Both are the kind of detail that turns a cartoon premise into something that feels almost like family history. All of that history is scaffolding, the behind-the-scenes architecture that explains how the show was made, sold, rerun, and remembered. What makes Goof Troop feel like a time capsule, though, is how thoroughly it captures a specific cultural atmosphere, the early 1990s West Coast suburban dream, as filtered through a kid's after-school imagination. Spoonerville is the kind of place where the sun seems contractually obligated to show up, where houses have room for backyard schemes, and where the neighborhood functions like a small stage. It is Suburbia presented as a playground with just enough rules to make trouble exciting, but not so many rules that it becomes miserable. There are lawns, fences, sidewalks, garages, and driveways that double as laboratories for childhood experimentation. It's a world where kids can roam, but still feel contained, where the boundaries of adventure are marked less by danger than by the distance your parents' voice can carry when dinner is ready. The show's humor often springs from ordinary suburban institutions that were especially vivid in that era. The ritual of school days, the social economy of being seen as cool, the low-stakes competitions that felt like high drama when you were 10, and the constant background hum of consumer life. Importantly, it treats those institutions the way kids often experience them, as enormous, dramatic systems that must be navigated with ingenuity and luck. A school event isn't just an event, it's a trial. A neighborhood contest isn't just a contest, it's a referendum on your reputation. A small mistake isn't just a mistake, it's a potential story that might chase you down the hallway. The series gets mileage out of that perspective, because Goofy's big, clumsy love collides perfectly with Max's fear of social catastrophe. The father will happily create a spectacle in the name of helping. The son would prefer help that can't be seen from orbit. The West Coast feeling also comes through in the show's spatial optimism. This is not cramped city comedy. It is wide driveway comedy. Characters have room to build contraptions, stage elaborate plans, and chase each other without immediately colliding with a stranger's knees. There's a sense of air and openness that supports the show's physical humor. The gags can literally stretch out. The neighborhood reads as a place built for cars and backyard projects, for block-level social rivalries and friendly invasions of personal space. Pete's used car business, in particular, is the kind of detail that grounds the show in a very American, pre-digital economy. The car lot as a small kingdom, the automobile as identity, the driveway as a social runway. The series understands that in many suburban childhoods of the period, the car was both a symbol of adult power and a magnet for kid curiosity. Children looked at cars the way pirates looked at ships, as future freedom, future embarrassment, future adventures, and in the meantime, something fun to climb on when nobody is looking. If Goof Troop were only a time capsule of consumer-era suburbia, it might be merely quaint, a pleasant postcard from a simpler media landscape. Its deeper value is that it captures the emotional aspirations of kids growing up in that setting, especially the desire to be seen as competent, independent, and socially fluent, while still needing comfort and rescue in ways they'd never admit out loud. Max embodies that contradiction with an almost heroic consistency. He wants to be normal, which in 1990s kid logic means not being singled out, not being embarrassed, and not being reminded in public that your parent is a walking natural disaster with an audible laugh. Yet he also wants his dad's love and approval. and he relies on Goofy's unshakable support, even when that support arrives wearing clown shoes and carrying a plan that appears to have been designed by a tornado. That tension creates the show's sweetest recurring pattern. Max tries to steer his life like he's already grown, and Goofy keeps proving, through blunders, apologies, and persistence, that being grown is not the same as being alone. Max's embarrassment is real, but so is his loyalty. He can complain about Goofy all day and still melt the moment his father's feelings are genuinely hurt. The show doesn't treat that as hypocrisy. It treats it as family. Kids often want distance and closeness at the same time, and Goof Troop lets that be funny without making it cruel. Goofy, in turn, represents a kind of parental ideal that feels distinctly aspirational for the period. Not perfect, not stern, not emotionally distant, but present. He is the dad who tries. He tries too hard. He tries in ways that explode. He tries in ways that accidentally involve sirens. But he tries, and that persistence communicates something comforting beneath the slapstick. A kid can mess up, a parent can mess up, and the relationship can still be safe. In the early 1990s, when plenty of sitcom dads leaned into authority, sarcasm, or a kind of lovable incompetence that still kept emotions at arm's length, Goofy's warmth is its own quiet argument for a gentler model of fatherhood. He isn't trying to win parenting, he's trying to stay connected. Pete's household provides the contrast that makes that argument pop. Pete is obsessed with status, control, and appearing successful, all of which are recognizable suburban pressures, especially in a setting where neighbors compare lawns, cars, and accomplishments as if they're trading cards. He wants the neighborhood to admire him, wants his family to reflect well on him, and often treats PJ like a project rather than a person. Even his affection can come with strings attached, as though love is something you earn by meeting performance metrics. The show plays that for laughs, but it also uses it as a mirror. It's the version of suburban aspiration where the dream curdles into performance, where pride turns into a constant audition for approval. And because Goof Troop is lighthearted, it can explore that tension without becoming grim. Pete isn't a monster. He's the neighbor who thinks winning is the same thing as living. The comedy comes from watching him learn, sometimes begrudgingly, sometimes by accident, that affection and humility are not forms of bankruptcy, and that being softened by love doesn't mean being defeated by it. The kids' friendship is the show's other great 1990s artifact, the Roman improvisational bond of suburban childhood before social media made every moment performative and before schedules swallowed every afternoon. Max and PJ do practically everything together, which is both the premise and the point. They scheme, they stumble, they get into trouble that feels enormous and resolves by dinner. Their mischief is rarely malicious. It's exploratory, a way of testing the world and testing themselves. They behave like kids who have time, space, and enough safety to make mistakes. An ingredient that's essential to the show's cozy feeling. That's a key detail in why the series reads as a loving snapshot of its time and place. It remembers an era when kids could still be portrayed as little anarchists in training, testing limits, mocking authority, chasing fun, trying on identities, without the narrative needing to label them as broken or doomed. The mischief is a form of growing up, and the show treats it as both hilarious and, in its own sideways way, meaningful. Goof Troop's critical charm, then, is not that it accurately documents any one California suburb down to the brand of soda in the fridge, but that it captures the myth of West Coast suburban childhood as it was sold and felt. Sunny, spacious, consumer-friendly, slightly competitive, and full of small dramas that mattered because the world was still small. It's a sitcom about a dad and a son, yes, but it's also a story about neighborhood life as a social universe, one where a kid's reputation can swing on a single embarrassing moment, where friendships form in driveways and on sidewalks, and where adults' aspirations leak into everything from real estate to car salesmanship to holiday pageantry. It portrays the suburbs as a kind of social aquarium. Everyone can see everyone else, which makes every mistake feel public and every triumph feel like a parade. In the end, Goof Troop's history is a classic Disney story in miniature. A familiar character reimagined for a new era, packaged with confidence, embraced by audiences, and then allowed to live on through reruns, movies, and affectionate callbacks. Its real legacy is that it made Goofy's chaos feel human and Max's frustrations feel kind. It preserved, in bright colors and good-natured mayhem, a version of 1990s suburban West Coast life, where the biggest danger was embarrassment, the greatest treasure was a best friend next door, and the most enduring comfort was a parent who might ruin everything, but would never stop showing up, never stop trying, and never stop loving loudly enough to be heard over the crash.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you, for you.